Imagine yourself drifting slowly, the sound of distant waves rolling and sighing against a wooden hull. You are safe, warm, and still, but in your mind, a quiet story begins to unfold. Tonight, we'll journey together into a world long past. A world of open seas and endless horizons. The early 16th century, an age of exploration, curiosity, and quiet suffering. The world as people knew it was smaller then, the edges uncertain, the maps incomplete, and the ocean vast beyond comprehension. This is the story of those who set sail under Ferdinand Magellan, the first expedition to circle the globe, though its leader would never return. It is a story not of heroism in the loud sense, but of endurance, of hunger, salt, and silence, of men who stared at the same blue expanse for months and wondered if they would ever see land again. But we will not rush through their tale. Instead, we'll drift gently through it, like a ship under quiet wind. We'll begin by imagining what it was really like to live aboard one of Magellan's ships, to wake beneath wooden beams slick with sea mist, to eat, to sleep, to labor, and to endure. So settle in, find a comfortable position, let your breathing slow. And as we begin this long voyage together, remember, this is not a tale of grand adventure, but of ordinary endurance on an extraordinary sea. Imagine the year is 1519. The world feels larger than it does today. Most of it is unknown, and for the men standing on the docks of Seville, the edge of that unknown waits just beyond the river's bend. You are one of them. Perhaps a farmer's son, drawn by the promise of wages and wonder. Perhaps a sailor from another voyage, still bearing the salt stains of past journeys on your skin. You don't know where this voyage will end. No one truly does. The ships are smaller than you'd imagine. Wooden, heavy, and creaking even while still tied to port. The Trinidad, Magellan's flagship, stands at the center, flanked by 4 others. The San Antonio, Concepcion, Victoria, and Santiago. Their sails hang limp in the morning air, their ropes taut, their decks cluttered with barrels, ropes, and provisions. The scent is thick, tar, salt, sweat, and the faint sweetness of dried figs. Men carry barrels aboard, salted meat, hardtack, wine, vinegar, olive oil. Somewhere, a priest murmurs a blessing, the Latin words dissolving into the sound of gulls. Soon, the tide will turn, and the city will fade behind you. At sea, time loses its shape. The days blend into one another, marked only by bells and meals. Morning begins with the creak of ropes and the soft slap of water against the hull. You wake on a hard plank, your breath clouding in the chill air. The ship sways gently, the boards moaning like something alive. Breakfast, if it can be called that, is simple. A small piece of hard biscuit, soaked in wine or water to soften it. Sometimes a spoonful of salted fish. It is rarely fresh, and more often, crawling with the tiny life that thrives at sea. You learn not to look too closely. Above deck, the world opens. The ocean stretches in every direction, blue, infinite, and indifferent. The sails rise like pale wings, the ropes groan, and the wind hums through the rigging in low, haunting tones. You are part of a floating world now, a society of perhaps 200 men, each with a role to play. There are sailors who climb the rigging with the ease of spiders, gunners who tend to the cannons, cooks who fight the endless battle against rot and salt, and officers who carry the weight of Magellan's strict discipline. The Captain General himself rarely speaks to common sailors, but his presence is felt in the firmness of the commands, in the routines that must be followed without question. To defy him would mean punishment, and punishment at sea is swift and public. Days at sea are not days of adventure, but of repetition. The rhythm of work becomes the rhythm of survival. Scrubbing decks, adjusting sails, turning the capstan, waiting. You hear the same voices, see the same faces, smell the same air. a mixture of sweat, wood, and sea brine. At night, the stars seem close enough to touch, but you're too tired to look long. You close your eyes and sleep, rocked by the same steady motion that could, if the weather changed, just as easily turn deadly. When storms come, they come without warning. Winds whip the rigging like whips, and waves strike the hull with heavy fists. Men cling to ropes, shout prayers, and the sea replies with a roar. But even here, in the storm, the voice of command must be calm. The ship must endure. Afterwards, when the sea quiets again, the deck glistens with rainwater and sea foam. Clothing dries stiff with salt. The sky returns to its calm gray blue, and the voyage continues. Weeks turn to months. The taste of fresh food becomes a memory. Water grows foul, wine turns sour, and the biscuit becomes as hard as wood. Sailors begin to fall ill, their gums swollen, their limbs heavy. No one yet knows the word scurvy, but they know the weakness that spreads among them. They call it the seasickness, and they endure it in silence. There is little laughter, little to break the monotony. Some carve bits of wood into shapes, tiny ships, animals, crosses. Others stare at the horizon for hours, imagining, you might find yourself doing the same, tracing the shape of the rigging against the sun, listening to the quiet drip of water below deck, counting the slow, steady roll of waves. And always there is Magellan, aloof, disciplined, devout. He believes utterly in his mission, to find a passage through the unknown southern seas. His faith keeps him upright when others doubt, but his distance makes him a mystery to most of his men. You hear rumors that some officers resent him, that some fear him, that even now a quiet unease brews beneath the daily routine. But that is for later. For now the ship sails on, through days of steady calm and long, dark nights. Imagine the creak of the boards, the soft rush of water against the hull, the murmur of distant voices in a language that feels both ancient and human. This was life aboard Magellan's ships. Slow, repetitive, and enduring, a floating fragment of civilization surrounded by infinity. As you drift with them in your thoughts, the sound of the sea begins to blur with your breathing. Each wave, each breath, each word, part of the same slow rhythm of survival and surrender. And in that rhythm, the voyage continues. Weeks became months, and months drifted into years. By now, the faces aboard the ships had changed. Some had vanished quietly. Others had grown older in ways that time alone cannot measure. Their skin was darker from sun and wind, their eyes deeper, lined with exhaustion. Magellan's fleet had crossed an ocean no European had ever seen before. They had passed through storms, hunger, and mutiny. And now, somewhere beyond the far edge of the known world, they had reached the islands that would later be called the Philippines. It was here, at the end of so much water, that the story of the great explorer met its quiet undoing. Imagine the scene. The air is warm and heavy with salt and spice. Palms sway on the distant shore, and the water glimmers with the soft colors of dawn. After months of endless blue, the sight of green land feels almost unreal. The men are thin, weary, and restless. Their clothes hang loosely, their hair and beards long and tangled. But there is joy, too. For the first time in many months, there are fruits to eat, fresh water to drink, and people who smile rather than threaten. Magellan believed he had reached the edge of the Indies, a gateway to trade, to glory, to the completion of a promise made to his king. He built alliances with local rulers, offering gifts, iron, and faith. He insisted that they, too, kneel to the cross and accept baptism. Some did, others did not. Among them was a small island chieftain named Lapu-Lapu, a man who saw no reason to bow to strangers. And so, Magellan chose to fight. It was a small battle, hardly more than a skirmish. But the sea has always been impartial to greatness. Magellan, The man who had crossed oceans stepped into shallow water with a handful of men, and met an end as quiet as it was inevitable. The waves carried him away. The tide went on rising, and his ships, now leaderless, drifted once more into uncertainty. You can imagine the silence that followed. The men who remained looked to one another and saw only fear. They were half a world from home, with half their number gone, and food running low. The tropical islands that had seemed like paradise became traps of heat, disease, and confusion. Local alliances turned to suspicion. The air itself felt heavy with loss. But someone had to lead. And so, the captains left behind made a choice. They would turn the ships westward, toward the Spice Islands, toward home. It would be the longest, loneliest return in history. Imagine the journey back. The sound of the wind is softer now, the waves gentler, but there is a weariness in every motion. The men no longer talk of discovery. They speak of home, of the smell of bread baking, of church bells, of their mothers' hands. But home is far away, and the sea has more trials to give. Sickness spreads through the decks like a shadow. Men lie motionless beside empty barrels. The cook's fires grow cold. Even the rats, once enemies, are gone, eaten long ago. Still, the Victoria, now under the command of Juan Sebastian Elcano, presses on. Sails patched, hull splintered, the ship limps westward. The sound of creaking wood becomes a kind of prayer. Every groan of the hull is a heartbeat. Every sunrise, a small mercy. When storms come, they no longer fight them. They endure them. When rain falls, they drink from cupped hands. When silence comes, they let it. At last, after months more of drifting across open seas, they reached the long-sought Moluccas, the Spice Islands. Nutmeg, cloves, cinnamon, scents so rich and strange that the men wept when they touched them, not from joy, but from exhaustion. They had done what no one else had done before. They had crossed the vast Pacific and found the other side of the world. But now came the hardest part, to return. 2 ships remained. One, the Trinidad, tried to sail eastward, back across the Pacific. It never returned. Captured, lost, or broken. No one can say for certain. The other, the Victoria, turned west, around the Cape of Good Hope, through storms that tore at its sails and hull. Men died one by one quietly, their names lost to wind and water. But somehow, impossibly, the Victoria endured. On a September morning in 1522, 3 years after leaving Spain, the Victoria limped into Seville. 18 men remained. 18 out of nearly 300. The townspeople who watched them return saw not heroes, but ghosts. Their clothes were rags, their faces hollow, their ship barely afloat. And yet, they had done the impossible. They had sailed around the entire world. Not for glory, not for riches, but simply because the sea would not let them stop. You can almost see it now. The quiet dockside, the slow lowering of the gangplank, the first hesitant step onto land that no longer feels solid. The men breathe air that smells of home, smoke, bread, and dust, so familiar and yet strange after so long. They do not cheer. They simply look up at the sky, the same sky they have followed for years, and let the world around them stand still. It is easy to imagine Magellan as a name, a legend, a face on a map, or a statue in a square. But the men who sailed with him were flesh and bone, hunger and hope. They did not seek to change the world, only to survive it. And in doing so, they traced a circle around it. As the night deepens and the sea in your mind grows still, their journey comes to rest, not in glory, but in the soft silence that follows endurance. The voyage home was not triumphant, but it was complete. And in the long quiet that followed, the world, for the first time, had become whole. The centuries since Magellan's voyage have softened the edges of that daring expedition. The roaring winds and clashing waves have quieted into the stillness of museum halls and dusty archives. Yet the world continues to search for traces, the faint echoes of that journey that reshaped maps, minds, and empires. Imagine yourself stepping into a quiet exhibition room. The air is cool, and the sound of footsteps is softened by the low hum of lights above. Behind glass, you see fragments, an astrolabe, worn smooth by salt and use. Piece of pottery from a shipwreck off the coast of Guam. A weathered journal written in the hand of Antonio Pigafetta, Magellan's chronicler. Pigafetta's words are, in many ways, the voice of the voyage that time could not drown. His writing, delicate, looping, and careful, records both the practical and the poetic. He describes the unfamiliar stars over the southern hemisphere, the strange fruits and birds encountered on unknown islands, the ceremonies of foreign kings, and the quiet, aching losses of men who never returned home. As you read his accounts, you can almost hear the ship's timbers creaking, the low murmur of prayers in the dark, the soft scratching of the quill as he writes by lantern light. He wrote not for glory, but for memory, a way to preserve the rhythm of their days when so much else was lost to the sea. Archaeologists, too, follow his words like breadcrumbs through time. In the Philippines, divers explore coral-crusted wrecks, searching for nails, ceramics, and cannon fragments, each discovery a quiet whisper from that age of sails. On the island of Mactan, where Magellan met his end, the sand still shifts with stories. There are local legends told in hushed tones of spirits that guard the shore, of nights when fishermen hear distant drums, echoes of that final battle. Archaeological digs there often uncover shards of pottery, beads, and once, a small cross made of brass. Simple, unassuming, but heavy with meaning. Was it brought by the expedition, or made later in imitation of them? No one can say for certain, but mystery, in history, is often more soothing than resolution. Meanwhile, in Seville, Spain, historians piece together the voyage from maps and merchant logs. The maps themselves are works of art, carefully inked coastlines, decorated with sea monsters and compass roses. Each line represents both discovery and doubt. The world as it was understood then was filled with blank spaces, and the men of Magellan's fleet, unknowingly, filled them at great cost. In quiet archives, gloved hands turn fragile pages. The ink has faded to a brownish whisper. A faint scent of dust and sea salt lingers. There are marginal notes, calculations of longitude, sketches of birds, lists of provisions. A reminder that even the greatest voyages were built on the ordinary. Beans, salt pork, biscuits, and the faith that tomorrow the wind might change. You might close your eyes for a moment and imagine being there, aboard a galleon, somewhere near the equator, with stars unknown to European eyes glittering overhead. The constellations feel different here, as if the heavens themselves had shifted. You hear the ocean breathe, vast, endless, eternal. The air smells faintly of pitch and salt. You could be anywhere. You could be nowhere. You are adrift, as they were, carried forward by curiosity, by duty, by something quietly human and unexplainable. Even centuries later, those traces, the maps, the journals, the relics carry the same steady rhythm as the waves that once bore them. Each discovery adds a brushstroke to the great, unfinished painting of history. And even when we cannot see the full picture, we can feel its texture. The way time softens edges, and how what was once perilous now feels peaceful in memory. The Magellan expedition was not only a voyage of conquest and commerce. It was a journey into the unknown mind of humanity itself, a reflection of our desire to understand the vastness beyond sight. And perhaps that is why we still search, still dig, still study those faded pages, not to conquer the world, but to feel connected to those who once dared to cross it. Now, as the museum lights dim in your imagination, and the hum of the air fades into silence, you find yourself gently drifting back from the artifacts, the archives, the waves, to a place of stillness. Beyond these quiet discoveries lies another side of the story, a world of kings and merchants, of noble courts and gilded ambitions. For while the sailors braved the storms, others watched from polished halls, their hands never touching the ropes, their dreams bound to gold and empire. Let us drift there next, into the soft glow of candlelight and the echo of footsteps in marble corridors, to explore what it was like among the powerful, who waited for news from the edge of the world. Now, imagine yourself far from the sea, far from the roar of wind and the groan of masts. We move inland toward polished floors and arched ceilings, toward the quiet luxury of palaces and courts, where men and women spoke softly of things that cost lives. It is Seville in the early 1500s. Morning sunlight seeps through latticed windows, painting gold upon the tiled floors. In the alcoves, the scent of orange blossom mingles with warm wax and parchment. Courtiers drift through the hall like slow-moving waves, their silks whispering softly as they pass. Here, the air is calm, but heavy with ambition. Spain's rulers, King Charles I and his ministers, spend their mornings surrounded by maps. Long tables are covered with them, oceans traced in ink, continents edged with speculation, and in the corner, a globe still missing half its truth. They speak of wealth, of God, of empire. Their voices are measured, deliberate. They discuss routes, tariffs, treaties, the fine threads that tie distant oceans to royal coffers. And somewhere among the scrolls lies the faint name of a man, Magellan, and a voyage that would circle the world, though many would not live to see its end. In these chambers, exploration is a matter of ink and signature, of trust and rivalry. One might sip sweet wine from silver, while elsewhere men drink brine in the dark. It is a strange symmetry, comfort and peril intertwined, each feeding the other. Outside, the city of Seville hums with quiet purpose. Ships' bells sound faintly in the distance, and merchants crowd the docks, counting barrels of olive oil, bolts of linen, and the strange spices trickling in from new lands. If you walk through the narrow streets near the harbor, you will find taverns filled with sailors' laughter, priests blessing small expeditions, scribes selling copies of exotic maps. There is an excitement there, restrained, but ever present, the pulse of a world expanding. And yet, for many, life continues unchanged. A washerwoman scrubs linen in the cool water of the Guadalquivir. Her hands are cracked, her song quiet. Children chase pigeons through the plaza. A monk walks slowly with his rosary, the beads clicking softly like the rhythm of time itself. Even in an age of discovery, the rhythm of ordinary life continues, steady, enduring, unbothered by empire. High above, in noble salons, the women of court gather in afternoon light. They speak of fashion, of faith, of letters from Lisbon and Madrid. They wear pearls from the Indies, silks from the Orient, and gold that once shimmered in the hands of men across the sea. Yet few wonder how those treasures arrived, whose fingers mined them, whose sails carried them. To them, it all seems inevitable, the natural order of things. But not everyone at court is blind to the cost. A few chroniclers, quiet and watchful, write in their journals that the ocean's bounty comes with a price, a trail of lives spent in the service of distance and desire. Their words are never shouted, only written softly, perhaps to be read centuries later by those of us who listen in stillness. As the evening settles over Seville, the lamps are lit one by one. The river glows with reflected light. Somewhere, in a room lined with polished wood, a royal secretary seals a letter, news of Magellan's success and of his death in the islands far away. The king reads the message with calm detachment. He nods once, perhaps murmurs a prayer. Then he sets the parchment aside. There are other matters to attend to, other voyages, other men. The world, vast and endless, waits for no one. And outside, the city sleeps. The hum of ships fades. The stars emerge again, the same stars that Magellan's crew once followed across the dark. Now, centuries later, the oceans remain, their rhythms unchanged. What once was daring is now distant. What once was peril is now legend. The sailors, the kings, the chroniclers, all gone. But their voices still drift faintly across time, like waves brushing the shore of memory. So, as we return from those gilded halls and salt-streaked decks, we can rest in the gentle thought that all human striving for knowledge, for power, for meaning, eventually becomes stillness. And in that stillness, we listen, we imagine, we remember. And so you find yourself here, not in Seville, not in the Pacific, but in the quiet of your own room, listening to the faint echo of the sea that shaped the world. Magellan's voyage, with all its peril and wonder, was never just a story of maps and glory. It was a story of patience, endurance, and the soft hum of persistence. It reminds us that discovery often comes quietly, and that courage sometimes sounds like silence. Imagine the world now, connected, illuminated, where oceans are crossed in ours, and the stars that once guided sailors now glow on our screens. Yet beneath all the noise, the same rhythm remains, the endless pulse of curiosity and the calm expanse of the unknown. Let that rhythm carry you now. Breathe slowly. Imagine the gentle roll of the tide beneath you, the creak of wood, the sigh of the wind. Far away, a bell rings once, then fades. The waves continue, steady and eternal, whispering stories to anyone still awake enough to hear them. You drift with them, across time, across history, across the soft darkness of night. And as the last sound fades, the sea becomes your lullaby. Sleep well, traveler of time.